My daughter brought her new boyfriend to dinner, a venture capitalist, with a slick smile. After his investment pitch, she slipped me a note, "Dad, don't trust him. It's a trap." I was rattled seeing those words, but then I realized he'd pegged me as just another foolish old man, easy prey. I had to show him never underestimate people, and I would teach him that evil can never triumph over justice. Thank you for being here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. If you received a warning note like that, would you trust your instincts or give them the benefit of the doubt? This story is fictional, but the lesson about trusting your gut is worth remembering. I've learned over the years that the most dangerous people often wear the warmest smiles. That thought crossed my mind as I sat across from Ethan Whitmore at Higgins' restaurant on a rainy Sunday evening in February, watching him charm my daughter with the kind of confidence that makes honest men uncomfortable. The restaurant hummed with Portland's dinner crowd, exposed brick Edison bulbs, the scent of wine and fresh bread. Rachel had chosen it for this introduction. Neutral ground, public, safe, or so she'd thought. "Mr. Sullivan, Rachel's told me so much about you." Ethan extended his hand across the table. 32 years old, tall, dark hair, charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. His grip was practiced, confident. Everything about him screamed success, everything except his eyes. When he thought no one was watching, they went flat. "Please call me Edward." I kept my smile easy. Retired cafe owner, harmless old man. That's what he needed to see. My daughter sat beside him, radiant in a burgundy dress. At 34, Rachel had built CyberShield from the ground up, a cybersecurity startup, 15 employees growing fast. She'd inherited Catherine's brilliance and my stubborn determination. A dangerous combination when targeted by the wrong person. "This is Diana Foster." Ethan gestured to the blonde woman beside him. "She's been mentoring Rachel on business development." Diana leaned forward, warm and enthusiastic. "Your daughter is exceptional, Mr. Sullivan. We're so excited about CyberShield's potential." Hannah, one of Rachel's engineers, sat quietly at the end of our table. The server brought appetizers. I'd ordered the steelhead trout. Ethan dissected a charcuterie board with commentary about each cheese performance of sophistication. "So, Edward," Ethan said casually, "Rachel mentioned you own a cafe in Eastmoreland, beautiful neighborhood. Those homes must be worth quite a bit now." There it was. The first probe. Sullivan's Corner. Nothing fancy, coffee and pastries. Opened it 5 years ago after I retired. I waved dismissively. "You don't want war stories from a former paper pusher." Rachel shot me a quick glance. She knew I was deflecting. Rachel clearly got her business acumen from somewhere. Ethan smiled. "That house, Bybee Boulevard area. What's it appraised at? 1.5, 1.6 million. Diana jumped in. "Ethan, you're doing it again, talking real estate at dinner." She laughed. "How he sees investment opportunities everywhere." Speaking of which, Ethan pivoted to Rachel, pulling out his phone. "I've finalized the terms. $2.5 million for 30% equity in CyberShield." Rachel straightened. I watched the tension around her eyes. "Your trajectory is impressive," Ethan continued. "You're exactly what Apex Ventures looks for. We manage about 45 million across our portfolio." But Rachel wasn't smiling. "The equity percentage is higher than we discussed, and you mentioned additional terms. Standard protective provisions." Ethan's tone remained confident. "Given the investment size, we'd need collateral guarantees. Your South Waterfront condo would work. 650 appraisal right. And if Edward would co-sign with his property as additional security, we could close by Friday." The temperature in my chest dropped. He wanted our homes. Both of them. That's... Rachel began, but Diana cut in gently. I know it sounds aggressive, sweetie, but it's standard for Series A rounds. Pure formality insurance paperwork. You'll never actually be at risk. She squeezed Rachel's hand. I wouldn't steer you wrong. You know that. Rachel did know. Diana had been advising her for 6 months. Coffee dozens of times. Solid advice. She'd become a friend. That's what made her so effective. I watched Ethan watching me, calculating whether the old man would be a problem. I'm flattered, I said slowly. But Rachel's business is her domain. I stay in my lane. Of course. Ethan nodded. Though families support each other. This deal would set Rachel up for life. 8-figure exit in 3 to 5 years. Rachel's jaw tightened. Can I see the full term sheet? Absolutely. I'll have my attorney send it tonight. Ethan lifted his wine glass. To new partnerships. Diana raised hers immediately. Rachel hesitated before joining. I lifted mine but didn't drink. Our entrees arrived. Rachel had ordered the salmon. As the server set down plates, she reached for her water glass and knocked her napkin to the floor between us. Oh, clumsy me, she said lightly. We both bent to retrieve it at the same moment. Our hands met under the table out of sight from the others. She pressed something small and stiff into my palm. A business card. Her eyes locked onto mine for half a second. Fear. Desperation. Then she straightened, napkin in hand, smile back in place. Thanks, Dad. I slipped the card into my jacket pocket as I sat up. Ethan was explaining something to Diana. Neither had noticed. The rest of dinner proceeded with surface conversation. Portland Weather Trailblazers restaurant recommendations. Ethan told charming stories. Diana praised Rachel. I smiled and nodded and played the proud, simple father. But I watched. I watched how Ethan's hand rested possessively near Rachel's, never touching but establishing territory. How Diana's enthusiasm never faltered, too perfect, too consistent. How Ethan's eyes tracked other diners when he thought no one was looking. Not admiring, hunting. When the check came, Ethan insisted on paying. Consider it the first investment. Outside February, rain drummed steadily. Ethan shook my hand. I'll see you Friday, Edward. We're going to do great things. Looking forward to it. I lied. Diana hugged Rachel. Call me tomorrow. They disappeared into a black Tesla. Rachel and I stood under the awning. Drive safe, sweetheart, I said. She hugged me tight, whispered, read it tonight. Then she pulled back, smiled like nothing was wrong, and walked to her car. I waited until her taillights disappeared. The street was busy, but anonymous couples rushing through rain traffic, hissing past. No one watching me. I pulled out the business card under the awning's shadow. Standard design, Rachel's name, Cyber Shield logo, contact information. I turned it over. 3 sentences in her precise handwriting. Dad, help, trap, trust no one. The rain drummed louder. Or maybe that was my pulse. I drove home through quiet streets. My house sat dark and empty the way it had been for 5 years, ever since Catherine. I locked the door, turned on the kitchen light, and read the message again. My daughter was in trouble, real trouble. She was smart enough to know she couldn't say anything. Openly, couldn't trust her phone, couldn't trust her friend Diana or her promising investor. I thought about Ethan's practiced handshake, his invasive questions, his demand for our homes, Diana's perfectly timed endorsements. How quickly this was moving. Friday, just 5 days away. And I thought about the 27 years I'd spent before I opened Sullivan's Corner, the cases I'd prosecuted, the predators I'd put in prison, the patterns I'd learned to recognize. Tomorrow morning, Rachel and I needed to talk. Really talk. Because whoever Ethan Whitmore pretended to be, I knew what he actually was. And I'd spent a career destroying men like him. I set the card on my kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and typed a name into the search bar. The clock read 9:47 p.m. It was going to be a long night. I didn't sleep much. By 4:30 Monday morning, I was already at Sullivan's Corner pulling cinnamon rolls from the oven, while rain pattered against the cafe's front windows. The dough was Catherine's recipe. She'd perfected it over years of Sunday breakfasts, back when our kitchen was full of laughter instead of silence. 5 years since I'd opened this place. 5 years since I'd stood in an empty house and realized I needed something to fill my days besides grief. The cafe occupied a corner storefront on Bybee Boulevard. Reclaimed wood, exposed brick, mismatched tables Catherine and I had refinished together. Her handwriting still covered the chalkboard menu. Life's too short for bad coffee. I couldn't bring myself to erase it. By 6:15, morning regulars had started trickling in. I made their drinks on autopilot while my mind ran through everything I'd found last night. Ethan Whitmore's digital footprint was impressive. Too impressive. LinkedIn showing 8 years at Apex Ventures. Professional website. Media mentions. All of it could be manufactured. I'd seen it before. The bell chimed at 6:40. Rachel stepped inside. Hair pulled into a ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that matched mine. She wasn't wearing makeup, something she never skipped unless seriously rattled. "Dad." She crossed straight to the counter. I poured 2 coffees, locked the front door, and flipped the sign to back in 15. We sat at the corner table away from the windows. Rachel wrapped both hands around her mug. "I need you to know something," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone." I waited. "I'm not just a tech founder." She met my eyes. "For the past 5 years, I've been an angel investor. I've done 12 deals, 800,000 deployed total." I blinked. "How much?" 800,000. "Returns have been good, 40% IRR. She showed me her phone. Companies I recognized. Due diligence notes that would impress any VC firm. I taught myself. I wanted to prove I could do it on my own terms. Pride swelled in my chest. So, when Ethan showed up, I knew immediately something was wrong. She swiped to his term sheet. His clauses are illegal. Liquidation preferences that would give him control at 30%. Drag-along provisions forcing me to sell. And the collateral requirement, Dad, no real VC demands personal property. That's loan shark territory. How long have you known? 2 weeks. Diana kept pushing me to sign fast. I stalled, said I needed my father to review it. Her voice cracked. I needed you to see him, to tell me if Mom's instincts came through. I squeezed her hand. Your mother would be so damn proud of you. Rachel's eyes glistened. I miss her. Me too, sweetheart. Every day. We sat in silence. Then Rachel straightened. So, what do we do? I took a breath. Time for the truth. Before I open this cafe, I said slowly, I was an assistant United States attorney. 27 years with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I prosecuted financial fraud, securities violations, white-collar crime. Rachel stared. You were a federal prosecutor. 289 cases. 87% conviction rate. I put away Ponzi schemers, investment fraudsters, men who looked exactly like Ethan Whitmore. I leaned forward. I retired in 2016 when your mother was diagnosed. She needed me home. We had 3 years before. I couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be just your dad. When Mom died, I couldn't go back to that world. The cafe gave me something gentle, a way to wake up without drowning. But you never stopped being that person, Rachel said. Last night I saw it. You were reading him like a case file, old habits. I managed a small smile. And yes, I saw exactly what he is. A predator. Rachel pulled up her phone. I looked him up. There's almost nothing before 2018. Like he didn't exist. Name change. New identity. Classic pattern for someone running from prior fraud. I thought about my midnight research. I have contacts, FBI agents, lawyers, investigators. If Ethan has a history, we'll find it. What about Diana? Don't know yet. She could be a victim or part of it. Either way, we can't trust her. Rachel nodded. So what's the plan? I pulled out a notepad. You keep playing along, stall the signing without making him suspicious. Ask questions, request clarifications. Be the careful founder. While you make some calls, quietly. No one can know I used to be AUSA. If Ethan researches me, he needs to find a retired cafe owner. Can we stop him? I thought about 27 years building cases, predators crumbling under evidence they thought they'd hidden. Yes, I said. But we need to be smart, patient. He's good at this. Probably done it before. We move too fast, he'll disappear. We need an airtight case, then drop it all at once. Rachel's jaw set in that way that reminded me of Catherine. Tell me what you need. We spent 20 minutes mapping strategy. She'd respond to the term sheet tonight with questions. Schedule a call with Ethan for Wednesday. Keep Diana updated with cheerful enthusiasm. Meanwhile, I'd work in shadows. Finally, Rachel stood. Or normal Monday routine. Text me when you're at the office. I walked her to the door, kept my voice low. I need to make 3 calls. The clock is ticking. She squeezed my arm. Be careful, Dad. You too, sweetheart. And remember, if Ethan figures out we're investigating, you might be in real danger. These people don't like being cornered. He picked the wrong family. She hugged me tight, then stepped into the rain. I watched her car disappear down Bybee Boulevard before unlocking the cafe. The regulars filed back in the same faces, the same orders, the same small talk about weather and traffic. I smiled, poured coffee, rang up pastries. Just Ed Sullivan. Neighborhood cafe owner. Nothing special. But in my pocket I had 3 names written on the back of a receipt. Laura Bennett, FBI. Richard Fitzgerald, Securities Law. Andrew Bradford, Investigative Journalism. The clock above the espresso machine read 7:53. I needed to make 3 calls. The clock was ticking. The first call went out at 8:15 Tuesday morning, after I'd sent my part-time staff home early and locked Sullivan's Corner's front door. I sat in the back office surrounded by boxes of coffee beans and old tax files and dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Laura Bennett answered on the second ring. Special Agent Bennett. Laura, it's Edward Sullivan. Silence. Then, Mr. Sullivan. My God, I thought, are you okay? I'm fine, but I need a favor. Her tone shifted immediately. Anything. Name it. I'd met Laura 19 years ago when she was a 29-year-old FBI agent assigned to one of my cases, a securities fraud prosecution that required complex financial analysis. She'd been sharp, relentless, hungry to learn. I'd mentored her through that investigation and 3 others afterward. Last I heard, she'd made senior special agent in the financial crimes unit. I need a background check, I said. Off the books, at least initially. Name is Ethan Whitmore, 32 claims to run a venture capital fund, called Apex Ventures, managing 45 million, based in Portland. What's your interest? He's targeting my daughter. Laura's voice hardened. Investment fraud. That's what I'm trying to determine. He's pressuring her to sign a deal that requires collateral her property and mine. The term sheet has clauses that look predatory. Timeline's aggressive. I need to know if he's done this before. Suku, give me 48 hours. If there's anything in the system, I'll find it. Laura, this stays quiet until we know more. If he's professional, he'll have monitoring on his name. Understood. And Ed. She paused. It's good to hear your voice, even if the circumstances suck. I smiled despite myself. Good to hear yours too. The second call went to Richard Fitzgerald at 9:30. His assistant put me through immediately. Edward Sullivan. Richard's laugh was warm, disbelieving. I thought you'd retired to grow organic vegetables or something equally boring. Close. I make coffee now. Of course you do. Let me guess you're calling because someone's about to have a very bad day. Potentially. I need you to look at a term sheet. Investment contract. My daughter's company. Richard's humor evaporated. Send it over. If you're concerned, I'm concerned. The investor claims to be legitimate VC, but the structure feels wrong. Liquidation preferences, drag-along provisions, personal collateral requirements. Jesus, that's not venture capital, that's extortion with paperwork. I heard typing. I'm clearing my afternoon. Email me everything term sheet, investor background, company details. I'll have an analysis by tonight. Bill me your normal rate. Ed, you spent 2 years prosecuting my biggest client and still bought me a beer afterward when you won. This one's on the house. We'd faced each other across courtrooms more times than I could count, Richard defending white-collar criminals with expensive suits and expensive arguments, me dismantling those arguments piece by piece. But he'd always played fair, never crossed ethical lines. When I'd retired, he'd sent a handwritten note. The courtroom will be duller without you. The third call went out at 10:15. Bradford. Andrew, it's Ed Sullivan. Holy shit. The ghost speaks. Andrew Bradford had the manic energy of someone who lived on coffee and conspiracy theories. Tell me you're calling with something good. I'm dying here covering city council meetings. How would you like to investigate a potential investment scam? I'm listening. Venture capital firm called Apex Ventures. 45 million fund or so, they claim. Run by someone named Ethan Whitmore. I need everything: SEC filings, corporate structure, past investments, anything that doesn't add up. What's the angle? He's targeting tech founders, young promising companies. Offers big money with terms that look wrong. Andrew's keyboard clattered in the background. Apex Ventures. I'm not seeing anything in the Business Journal archives. No press releases, no portfolio company announcements. For a $45 million fund, that's weird. They should be shouting from rooftops. Exactly. Give me a week. If this guy's dirty, I'll find the dirt. You've got 3 days. Even better. I love impossible deadlines. He paused. Ed, why do I get the feeling this is personal? Because you're a good reporter. Is Rachel okay? She will be. I hung up and stared at my phone. 3 calls. 3 people I trusted. 3 different angles of attack. Now I had to wait. That evening, Rachel texted me, date with E. Went fine. Got everything. I called her immediately. You're sure he didn't suspect? Positive. I played the eager founder. Asked about timeline, equity structure, collateral logistics. He ate it up. Her voice was steady, controlled. Dad, he's good. Charismatic patient always has an answer. If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. But you do know better. Yeah, and I have 47 minutes of recorded conversation proving he's pressuring me into a trap. Pride mixed with fear in my chest. Send me the file, encrypted. Already done. Dad, when he talked about the collateral, he smiled. Not a friendly smile, like he was imagining already owning our homes. My grip tightened on the phone. You did good, sweetheart. Now we wait for the FBI. Laura called Thursday morning at 6:43. I was opening the cafe, still half asleep. Ed, we need to talk. I locked the door again. What did you find? Ethan Whitmore doesn't exist before 2018. Not in any meaningful way. But Ethan Morgan, that's a different story. My pulse quickened. Go on. Legal name change filed in Nevada, March 2018. Before that, Ethan Morgan was a person of interest in an investment fraud case out of San Francisco. 2017 to 2018. Target was a young tech founder named Sarah Morrison and her father James. They lost $5 million. Criminal charges. Never filed. By the time the victims realized it was fraud, Ethan had moved money offshore and changed identities. Sarah's father, James Morrison, had a fatal heart attack 6 months after they lost everything. She was too devastated to pursue it further. I closed my eyes. What's the pattern? Single founders. Female mid-20s to mid-30s. Tech sector. Wealthy fathers willing to co-sign or guarantee investments. He gets close builds trust, then structures deals that let him seize assets when companies inevitably fail. Which they do because he sabotages them. How many victims? That's what I'm working on. Sarah Morrison is the only one who filed a report, and even that was too late. But the pattern suggests he's done this before. Maybe multiple times. What about Diana Foster? Laura paused. Who? A woman who's been mentoring my daughter. She introduced Ethan to Rachel. She's been pushing hard for Rachel to take the deal. Send me her details. Photo, social media, anything. I pulled up Rachel's Instagram on my laptop, found a photo from 3 months ago, Rachel and Diana at a coffee shop, both smiling. I forwarded it. Laura's sharp intake of breath came through the line. Ed, this woman, I need to run facial recognition. If she's part of his operation, then Rachel's surrounded. I'll call you back in an hour. She hung up. I sat in the dim cafe, the FBI report glowing on my laptop screen. Ethan Morgan, $5 million. A man who died from a broken heart after losing everything. And Diana Foster, who'd spent 6 months earning my daughter's trust, steering her directly into Ethan's trap. I pulled up Diana's photo again. Blonde, warm, smile, friendly eyes. The kind of person you'd trust with your secrets. If Diana endorsed Ethan this strongly, who was she really working for? Rachel called me Friday afternoon, her voice tight with controlled anger. Dad, Diana Foster didn't exist before last year. I set down the espresso cup I'd been cleaning. What do you mean? Her entire digital presence, social media, professional networks, business profiles, everything was created in early 2023. March through April. She was typing as she talked. I ran reverse image searches on her photos. Nothing. She materialized out of thin air. My pulse quickened. Business registrations. Diana Foster Consulting filed March 2023. Virtual office address. Dad, she's not real. Diana Foster is a persona. Can you dig deeper? Already on it. I texted Laura. Rachel confirmed Diana equals fake identity. Created 2023. Her reply, working on it. We'll call tomorrow. Saturday morning, Rachel texted at 9:47, Dad. Call me. Now. I locked the cafe door and dialed. I found it. Rachel's voice shook with fury. Clark County, Nevada. Marriage license database. Public records. Found what? Ethan Whitmore got married in June 2021, Las Vegas. The bride was Melissa Whitmore. My stomach dropped. Diana. That's her legal name. I found the certificate, date efficient, everything. Dad, they're married. They've been running this scam together. 30 seconds later, my phone lit up. Official Clark County document. Bride Melissa Whitmore. Groom Ethan Whitmore. Date June 15, 2021. The woman who'd befriended my daughter over coffee, who'd given her business advice, who'd enthusiastically endorsed her own husband's predatory scheme. Rachel, are you somewhere safe? I'm at home. Door-locked security system on. I forwarded everything to Laura. She paused. If they're married, this isn't just fraud. This is organized crime. I know, sweetheart. Andrew Bradford's email arrived Sunday morning at 6:15. Apex Ventures equals Ghost Company. Ed, you were right. Apex Ventures is a shell. Website domain registered 2020. 0 CC filings. No Form D, no Form ADV. A legitimate $45 million fund would have extensive regulatory paperwork. Business address is a virtual office at Brewery Blocks, $89 per month. Phone traces to an untraceable virtual service. No press releases, no industry mentions before 2022. This venture capital firm doesn't exist. It's an elaborate stage set. I'm continuing to dig. Call me. Andrew. I forwarded it to Laura and Rachel, then stared at Catherine's photo on the wall. Watch what they do, not what they say, she'd always told Rachel. Ethan and Melissa had done this before. I was certain now. Laura's call came at 2:30 that afternoon. Ed, you need to sit down. I'm already sitting. Melissa Whitmore is Ethan's wife, married June 2021. But that's not the bad news. She paused. They've been doing this for 8 years. I found 12 confirmed victims across 6 states, $22 million stolen. I closed my eyes. 12 families. Talk me through the pattern. Target selection is precise. Female founders ages 25 to 40, tech sector. Every victim had a wealthy father, not publicly wealthy, but comfortable. Hidden assets. Melissa approaches first as a mentor or consultant. 3 to 6 months building trust, gathering intelligence. Then Ethan appears with his VC pitch. And the fathers, always brought in as co-signers or guarantors. Investment terms require collateral daughter's property plus father's. When companies fail because Ethan sabotages them, collateral is forfeit. Money moves offshore through shell companies. By the time victims realize it's a scam, they've disappeared. Name changes, new city, new victims. I thought about families destroyed. Give me examples. Sarah Morrison, 26, San Francisco, 2017 to 18. Father James, 59. Lost $3.1 million. James died of a heart attack 6 months later. Sarah was too traumatized to prosecute. Next. Jennifer Torres, 28, Austin, 2019. Father Carlos, 62. Lost $2.4 million. Carlos filed bankruptcy. And third, Amanda Richardson, 32, Denver, 2020 to 21. Father Robert, 67. Lost $4.2 million. Amanda hasn't spoken to her father in 3 years. The guilt destroyed their relationship. 12 daughters who'd trusted the wrong people. 12 fathers who'd lost everything. Ed, there's something else. A few victims mentioned a name, Victor Castellano. Possible connection to a larger network operating in 15 states. I pulled up the marriage license screenshot. Ethan and Melissa Whitmore smiling in a Las Vegas chapel, June 2021. 2 years of marriage. 8 years of destroying families together. Laura, I need everything. Victim statements, financial records, property transfers, shell company structures, every scrap of evidence. You're building a case. I spent 27 years as a federal prosecutor. I know how to build a case. I studied the certificate on my screen. If they're this organized, multiple identities, offshore accounts, shell companies' repeated pattern across state lines, this isn't just fraud. What are you thinking? I thought about the RICO cases I'd prosecuted, criminal enterprises, pattern of illegal activity through a continuing organization, 2 people, 8 years, 12 victims, $22 million, interstate operation. This is RICO, I said quietly. Federal conspiracy, organized crime. Laura was silent. Then, if you're right, we're talking 20 years minimum. Per count. They've destroyed 12 families. 1 man is dead. I looked at Catherine's photo. We're going to stop them. Permanently. If Rachel is their next target, if they realize you're investigating, I know. We move carefully. Build the case airtight before they suspect. I glanced at the calendar. Friday was the signing meeting. 5 days. How fast can you pull together victim documentation? 72 hours, maybe less. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet cafe and thought about the 2 predators circling Rachel. Ethan with his practiced handshake. Melissa with her warm smile and carefully constructed friendship. They'd spent 8 years perfecting their system, identifying targets, building trust, stealing everything, disappearing. But they'd made one mistake. They'd chosen the wrong family. I pulled out my notepad and started writing. Victim names, amounts, dates, patterns, 12 families, $22 million, 8 years. This was RICO, federal conspiracy, and I was going to destroy them. Richard Fitzgerald's office occupied the 19th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. The conference room table was buried under documents, FBI reports, term sheets, victim statements, financial records. A whiteboard on the wall displayed a timeline in Richard's neat handwriting, 8 years, 12 victims, $22 million. I sat across from Richard, Rachel beside me. None of us had slept much. All right, Richard tapped his pen against a legal pad. Let's talk about what we have and what we need. He'd spent Sunday night reviewing everything Laura had sent. Now Monday morning, he looked like a lawyer preparing for the trial of his career, which in a way he was. Evidence of wire fraud solid. Ethan's emails contained false representations about Apex Ventures' fabricated portfolio companies' forged credentials. That's 18 counts minimum across 12 victims. Conspiracy, I asked. Also solid. The marriage license proves Ethan and Melissa have been operating as partners since at least 2021. Melissa's fake identity as Diana Foster establishes knowing participation in the scheme. Add Rachel's recordings of their coordinated pitch, that's textbook conspiracy. Identity theft. Melissa created a false persona with business registrations, social media presence, professional credentials. Clear violation of federal identity theft statutes. Rachel leaned forward. So we have them. Why do we need a trap? Richard set down his pen. Because right now we have historical evidence. Past crimes, past victims. To make a RICO case stick, to prove this is an ongoing criminal enterprise, we need to catch them in the act. Real-time predicate offenses. And financial crimes aren't enough, Rachel asked. They are technically, but… Richard glanced at me. Ed, you prosecuted RICO cases. Tell her. I thought about the mobsters I'd put away. The organized fraud rings, the networks that had seemed untouchable until we found the right leverage. RICO requires a pattern of racketeering activity, I said. Minimum 2 predicate acts within 10 years. We have that. But the strongest RICO cases, the ones that get 20-year sentences that survive appeals, involve serious crimes. Violence, extortion, attempted harm. I met Rachel's eyes. If we can prove Ethan and Melissa are willing to hurt people to protect their operation, we don't just have fraud. We have a violent criminal enterprise. You think they'll try something? They've been doing this for 8 years. They've stolen $22 million. They know how to identify threats and eliminate them. I paused. One victim's father died of a heart attack. Another victim attempted… I stopped choosing my words carefully. They've left casualties. If they feel cornered, they'll escalate. Richard nodded. Which brings us to the trap. Ed proposed it last night. I think it's risky, but it might work. Walk me through it, Rachel said. I pulled out my notepad. You text Ethan today. Enthusiastic message. Dad finally agreed. Let's celebrate before Friday's signing. Suggest dinner tomorrow night, Tuesday. High-end restaurant, public place. You, me, Ethan, Melissa. Like the first dinner. Exactly. But this time you're wearing a wire. FBI-provided audio recorder hidden. Your phone on the table as backup recording app running. You're taking notes about the deal. What's my angle? Eager daughter who convinced her reluctant father. You'll ask questions designed to make them reveal their real intentions. What happens if the company struggles? How does the collateral work exactly? Have you done deals like this before? Richard interjected. The goal is to get them discussing their actual plan, seizing your assets, sabotaging the company. If we're lucky, they'll reference past victims. Anything that establishes pattern and intent. And if they try something, Rachel asked quietly. Laura Bennett and her FBI team will be 2 blocks away. Plainclothes surveillance van. If you signal distress, or we observe a clear crime, they move in immediately. Signal distress how? Safe word. Something you'd naturally say but wouldn't normally use. Laura suggested actually. Repeated twice in one sentence. I'm actually really excited about this deal, actually. Sounds natural, but flags danger. Rachel was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, what do you think they'll try? I don't know, I admitted. 12 families and only Sarah Morrison's father pursued any kind of complaint. The others were too traumatized, too ashamed, or too scared. That suggests Ethan and Melissa are good at covering their tracks. Maybe threats, maybe something more direct. More direct meaning if they want you compliant and your father unquestioning, they might try to incapacitate one of us. Drug someone's drink, create confusion, establish control. I looked at my daughter, which is why this is dangerous. We're essentially giving them opportunity and motive. Richard leaned back in his chair. From a legal standpoint, we're on solid ground. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording. You're consenting, so anything captured is admissible. The restaurant is public space, no expectation of privacy. FBI presence is precautionary, not entrapment. But, Rachel prompted. But you're not law enforcement. You don't have a badge, tactical training, or legal protection if things go sideways. If Ethan figures out what you're doing… Richard's voice was grave. Ed, you know what I'm about to say. I did. If Ethan suspects anything, Rachel could be in real danger. The conference room was silent except for the muted hum of downtown traffic 19 floors below. Rachel stared at the whiteboard timeline. 8 years. 12 victims. Sarah Morrison's father dead at 59. Amanda Richardson estranged from her family for 3 years. Jennifer Torres, whose father declared bankruptcy. They've done this 12 times, Rachel said finally. 12 families destroyed. And they were going to make mine number 13. She turned to me. Dad, I'm not backing down. I can do this, Rachel. I've spent 6 months with Melissa. I know how she operates. I've watched Ethan pitch. I know his tells, his rhythms, his pressure tactics. Her voice was steady, controlled. I've negotiated 50 term sheets. I've handled aggressive VCs, predatory investors, founders trying to manipulate me. I can play this role. This isn't a negotiation. These are criminals. I know. Which is why I'm the only one who can bait the trap. She met my eyes. You taught me to think strategically, to assess risk, to protect what matters. She gestured at the documents covering the table. This matters. Stopping them matters. Making sure they never do this to another family matters. I thought about Catherine, about the values we'd tried to instill in Rachel: courage, justice, protecting the vulnerable. I'd spent 27 years putting predators in prison. Now my daughter wanted to help me catch 2 more. But the predators I'd prosecuted had never been targeting my child. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Laura's outside. I asked her to join us for the technical planning. All ready? Rachel asked. If we're doing this tomorrow night, we need today to prepare. Wire fitting, safe words, contingency protocols, surveillance positioning. Richard stood. But before Laura comes in, I need both of you to understand something. Once we set this in motion, there's no stopping it. Rachel will be exposed. If Ethan and Melissa realize what's happening, they could run, destroy evidence, or hurt Rachel. I finished. Yes. I looked at my daughter. 34 years old. Brilliant, capable, determined. The little girl who used to beg me for bedtime stories about courtroom victories had grown into a woman willing to face down criminals to protect her family. Are you absolutely sure you can do this? I asked. Rachel's jaw set in that way that reminded me so much of Catherine, the expression that meant she'd already made up her mind and nothing would change it. Dad, I've closed 50 term sheets. I can handle 1 con artist. The restaurant was the kind of place where entrees cost $50, and the wine list required a sommelier. Dim lighting, white tablecloths. A corner booth Ethan had specifically requested, secluded enough for private conversation, public enough to seem legitimate. I felt the wire taped against my ribs beneath my shirt. FBI provided smaller than a breath mint, transmitting everything to Laura's team 2 blocks away. Across from me, Rachel wore hers, hidden in a pendant necklace. To anyone watching, we were a father and daughter celebrating a business deal with her investor and his colleague. Only we knew we were walking into a trap we'd set ourselves. Melissa Diana, as Rachel still called her, sat to my left, warm and enthusiastic as always. Ethan sat across from her beside Rachel, his charming smile never quite reaching his eyes. So, Friday at 2 p.m., Ethan said, cutting into his steak. My office, 18th floor, brewery blocks. Bring your ID, Edward. We'll need it for the notarization. Of course. I played the eager father. I'm just grateful Rachel has someone like you backing her vision. Cyber Shield is special. Rachel's special. He turned to my daughter. Your attorney should have the final documents by Thursday morning. Timeline's tight, but we want to close before another fund tries to poach you. Rachel nodded, playing her part perfectly. I'm ready. Dad and I both are. Melissa raised her wine glass. To new partnerships, and to fathers who support their daughters' dreams. We all drank. The wine was excellent, a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, that probably cost more than I made in a day at Sullivan's Corner. You know, Ethan said casually, turning to me, you must have done quite well in your corporate days. That neighborhood Eastmoreland isn't exactly entry-level. I shrugged, playing modest. Careful saving. Lucky timing on some investments. Modest. Ethan's smile widened. That area's been appreciating 20% annually. Your home alone must be worth what, 1.6 million. Here was the moment. The bait Richard and I had planned. Well, between my late wife's life insurance, some family inheritance, and those lucky investments, I paused as if embarrassed. Let's just say I'm comfortable. Maybe 7.2 million liquid, give or take. Ethan and Melissa exchanged the briefest glance. Greed naked and raw before their masks snapped back into place. That's wonderful, Melissa said warmly. Financial security at your age, that's the dream. Our entrees arrived. The waiter made a production of presenting each plate, grinding fresh pepper, refilling water glasses. During the flurry of activity, I saw it, Melissa's hand reaching across the table toward the bread basket. Natural movement. Except her other hand, the one hidden by her napkin, passed over my wine glass. A quick tilt of her wrist. Something dropped into the dark red liquid. She withdrew smoothly, picked up a roll, smiled at something Ethan was saying. My heart hammered against the wire. 27 years as a prosecutor, I'd heard about this. Rohypnol, GHB, any number of sedatives used to incapacitate targets. Colorless, tasteless, dissolved in wine within seconds. They were trying to drug me. I kept my expression neutral, cutting into my salmon. Across from me, Rachel's eyes met mine. She'd seen it too. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, clumsy me. Rachel knocked her napkin to the floor. Dad, can you help? We both bent down, breaking line of sight from Ethan and Melissa. She drugged your glass, Rachel whispered, barely audible. I'm switching them. I nodded once. We straightened. Rachel reached for the water pitcher, creating motion and distraction. Let me pour everyone more water. In the movement, glasses shifted. Rachel's hand passed over mine, sleight of hand smooth. When the motion stopped, my wine glass sat where hers had been. The tainted glass now sat in front of my daughter, who would not drink from it. Thank you, sweetheart. I lifted my glass, Rachel's clean one, and took a deliberate sip. Melissa watched me, waiting. 20 minutes later, right on schedule for Rohypnol's onset, I let my words slur slightly. Wow, this wine is strong. Edward, are you all right? Melissa's voice dripped with false concern. I blinked, shook my head as if clearing it. I'm fine. Must have eaten too fast. Or maybe I'm just not used to wines this good anymore. I forced a laugh and took another sip. Actually, I feel fine now. Frustration flickered across Melissa's face. Just for a second, just long enough for Rachel's wire to catch it. The rest of dinner proceeded with surface conversation. Ethan discussed CyberShield's growth projections. Melissa praised Rachel's leadership. I played the proud, slightly tipsy father who'd maybe had one glass too many, but was recovering fine. All the while, the tainted wine glass sat untouched in front of Rachel, evidence of attempted murder waiting to be collected. When dinner ended, Rachel made a show of cleaning up a spilled napkin, wrapping the wine glass inside it, and dropping everything into her large purse. I saw her hand move to the edge of the tablecloth, near where my original glass had been, folding a corner into her bag as well. Evidence secured. Chain of custody maintained. FBI would have everything they needed. Outside, we said our goodbyes. Ethan shook my hand. Friday, 2 p.m. Don't be late. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I promised. They drove away in their Tesla. Rachel and I stood in the rain until their taillights disappeared. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Laura, package secured. Dad's safe. Wednesday morning, Laura called at 6:30. Ed, the lab, ran the glass overnight. And flunitrazepam, 2.5 milligrams. Enough to incapacitate an adult male for hours. Combined with alcohol, it could have been fatal. Her voice was tight with anger. Melissa Whitmore's fingerprints are on the glass stem. We have her. I sat at Sullivan's Corners counter, the cafe still dark and locked, and felt 27 years of prosecutorial instinct crystallize into cold certainty. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, interstate racketeering, and now attempted murder. We have them for attempted murder, I said quietly. Tomorrow we finish this. Thursday morning, we met at an FBI field office in Northeast Portland, an unmarked building that could have been any corporate park, except for the armed guards at the entrance and the secure conference rooms inside. Laura Bennett stood at the head of a table covered in equipment. Microphones no bigger than shirt buttons. Recording devices disguised as pens, watches, phone accessories. A panic button that looked like a car key fob. Day 1, she said. We make sure the technology doesn't fail. Rachel picked up one of the microphones, turning it over in her fingers. This is smaller than the one I wore to dinner. That was consumer grade. This is what we use for undercover operations. Laura demonstrated clipping it inside a blazer lapel. Invisible even if someone's standing 2 feet away. Transmits in real time to our van. Battery life, 4 hours. The meeting won't last 4 hours, I said. No, but we plan for worst case. Laura handed Rachel a blazer. Put this on. Let's test placement and movement. For the next 2 hours, Rachel practiced. Walking, sitting, gesturing, making sure the microphone stayed hidden and the audio stayed clear. I watched from the observation room, listening through headphones, as her voice came through with perfect clarity. Laura taught her the signals. Distress phrase, I'd like to call my lawyer. Panic button press once SWAT deploys in 90 seconds. Abort mission, Edward scratches his right ear twice. What if Ethan asks to see my phone? Rachel asked. Recording app looks like a clock widget. He won't notice. Laura's expression was serious. But Rachel, if at any point you feel unsafe, you use the panic button. Pride isn't worth your life. Friday brought the tactical briefing. 6 people in tactical gear filled the conference room, Laura's SWAT team. Body armor, helmets, weapons I recognized from my prosecutorial days. These weren't the agents who investigated white-collar fraud. These were the ones who breached doors and neutralized threats. Brewery blocks, 1800 block Northwest 13th. Laura said, pulling up building schematics on a screen. 18 floors. Suite 1804. 2 exits, main elevator and fire stairs on the east side. One of the SWAT agents, Torres, according to his name tape, pointed at the floor plan. Glass walls here. If we see a weapon or imminent threat, we go loud immediately. Otherwise, we wait for the signal. What's the signal? Rachel asked. You say, I'd like to call my lawyer. Or you press the panic button. Or we lose audio for more than 15 minutes and can't re-establish contact. Where will you be? 2 blocks away. Northwest 11th and Everett. Van looks like a plumbing contractor. We'll have 2 plainclothes agents in the building, 1 in the lobby, 1 on the 17th floor stairwell. You're covered. I'd prosecuted cases with SWAT support before. I knew how fast they could move, how overwhelming their presence was. But knowing my daughter would be in a room with two criminals while we waited for the right moment to intervene, that was different. "What if he runs?" I asked. "Then he runs into us," Torres said simply. "Nobody gets out of that building once we're deployed." Saturday, we met at Richard's office. The conference table looked like a war room. Marriage license blown up to poster size. Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore, June 15, 2021. Victim list 12 names with dates and amounts. Toxicology report. Melissa's fingerprints circled in red. Audio files queued on a laptop ready to play. "This is what you'll present," Richard said, handing me a leather portfolio. Order matters. Start with the marriage license establishes the conspiracy. Then the victim pattern establishes RICO enterprise. Then the toxicology report proves violent intent. Then the recordings lets them hang themselves. I reviewed each document, my prosecutor's brain automatically organizing the narrative. Hook evidence pattern conclusion. I'd done this 289 times before, but never with my daughter as the bait. "When do I reveal my identity?" I asked. "After Rachel's initial questions," Richard said. "Let her establish that she knows something's wrong. Then you drop the hammer." "I'm not just a cafe owner. I'm Edward Sullivan, retired assistant U.S. attorney." Watch their faces. That's when they'll realize the trap. What if they lawyer up immediately? They will. Doesn't matter. By then the FBI will be in the room. They can't unincriminate themselves. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Ed, this is the strongest case I've ever seen. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, attempted murder, RICO. You've built something prosecutors dream about. I just want my daughter safe." "She will be. We'll make sure of it." Sunday evening, Rachel came to my house in Eastmoreland. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Catherine and I had shared breakfast for 30 years, where Rachel had done her homework as a kid, where I'd told my daughter her mother was gone. "Dad, what if I freeze?" Rachel's hands wrapped around her coffee mug, knuckles white. "What if seeing them face to face makes me forget everything we planned?" I thought about Catherine. About the night before my biggest trial, a $120 million Ponzi scheme, 200 investors destroyed when I'd sat at this same table paralyzed with doubt. Catherine had made me tea, sat across from me. Let the silence settle before she spoke. "Ed, you have the truth. They have lies. The truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs to be spoken." She'd called truth the best armor. Nothing could penetrate it. I told Rachel that story now. "Your mother faced something scarier than Ethan Whitmore. Cancer. 3 years of fighting something she couldn't negotiate with or outsmart. And she taught you how to face hard things. I miss her. Me too. Every day." I reached across the table, took Rachel's hand. "But she's in this with us. Her wisdom, her courage. You're not performing tomorrow. You're not pretending. You're revealing what is." Ethan and Melissa have built 8 years of lies. All you have to do is tell the truth, and their entire structure collapses. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she squeezed my hand. "Mom's armor. The best there is." We spent the next hour rehearsing. I played Ethan, then Melissa. Rachel practiced her questions, her reveals, her responses. By the time she left at 10 p.m., her hands were steady. Monday, March 4th, 1:45 p.m. I drove us to the Pearl District in my Honda Accord. We parked 3 blocks from Brewery Blocks, far enough that the SWAT van wouldn't be visible, close enough to walk. The building was all glass and steel, 18 stories of corporate ambition. I felt out of place in my cafe owner clothes, khakis, and a button-down nothing like the suits I'd worn in courtrooms decades ago. We rode the elevator in silence. 15 floors, 16, 17. Rachel's hand found mine. Squeezed once. 18. The doors opened. Down the hall, glass doors etched with Apex Ventures. Through them, I could see Ethan's office, the stage he'd built for this con. Rachel looked at me, her mother's determination in her eyes. This is it. Still here, comment justice below, so I know you're riding this out with me. Before we move forward, this story blends factual patterns with fictional details for impact. If you'd rather skip ahead, no hard feelings, exit now. But if you want to witness what happens when predators underestimate a retired prosecutor, keep watching. The confrontation is next. The office was all glass and false promises. 18th floor corner suite with Pearl District views stretching to Powell's Books and beyond. Ethan's desk sat against floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek and impersonal rented furniture for a rented identity. Fake diplomas hung on the walls, MBA from Stanford Venture Capital Industry Awards. Photos with tech founders who probably didn't know their images had been stolen. Nicole Brennan, 26, and fresh out of law school, bustled around a conference table arranging signature pages and notary stamps. She smiled at us, friendly professional, completely unaware she was working for criminals. Mr. Sullivan, Miss Parker, welcome. Ethan stood extending his hand. $2,000 suit, practiced smile, the confidence of a man who thought he'd won. Let's make this official, shall we? Melissa, still playing Diana Foster, sat in a chair by the window, radiating supportive warmth. Rachel, this is so exciting. I'm so proud of you. I felt the wire against my ribs, transmitting everything. 2 blocks away, Laura Bennett and her SWAT team listened to every word. In my jacket pocket, Rachel's evidence tablet held 289 cases worth of prosecutorial experience compressed into one devastating presentation. Coffee, Nicole offered, pouring from a carafe. Playing the perfect assistant, unknowingly serving refreshments at a crime scene. Thank you. Rachel's voice was steady, controlled. She'd inherited Catherine's ability to stay calm under pressure. Before we sign, I have questions about Clause 7.3. Ethan settled into his chair, spreading hands magnanimously. Of course. What concerns you? This liquidation preference. Rachel tapped the document. It gives you controlling rights even at 30% equity. That's unusual. Standard protective provisions. And the drag-along clause. It forces me to sell if you find a buyer regardless of my wishes. Why would I agree to that? Ethan's smile tightened slightly. Rachel, we discussed this. We discussed a partnership. This document describes a hostile takeover. She looked up, met his eyes. And the collateral requirement. My condo, plus my father's house. No legitimate venture capital firm demands personal property as loan security. Rachel, sweetie, Melissa started. I've reviewed over 50 term sheets as an angel investor, Rachel said calmly. I've deployed $800,000 across 12 deals over 5 years. I know what standard looks like. Your structure isn't standard. It's illegal. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ethan's mask slipped. Just for a second, but I saw it, the cold calculation behind the charm, the predator realizing his prey had teeth. Angel investor. Melissa's voice was carefully controlled. I never mentioned a lot of things. Rachel pulled out her phone. Like the fact that I recorded our date last week. She pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the office. The collateral is insurance. If CyberShield underperforms, we need asset protection. Your property, your father's property, it's all part of the package. Nicole Brennan's face went pale. Mr. Whitmore, what is this? Rachel, I don't know what game you're playing. Ethan started to stand. It's not a game. I rose from my chair, and when I spoke, it was with the voice I'd used in federal courtrooms for 27 years. Calm, precise, absolutely certain. And I'm not just a cafe owner. Ethan froze. My name is Edward Sullivan. I spent 27 years as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Oregon Financial Crimes Division. I prosecuted 289 cases, wire fraud, securities violations, investment schemes, exactly like yours. My conviction rate was 87%. I pulled out the tablet, connected it wirelessly to the conference room display screen. Evidence I'd spent 4 days organizing appeared in high definition on the wall. Let me show you what I found. The marriage license filled the screen. Clark County, Nevada, June 15, 2021. Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore. You're married. Diana Foster doesn't exist. She's Melissa, your wife, your partner in an 8-year criminal enterprise. Melissa stood abruptly. Ethan's face had gone white. Your real name is Ethan Morgan. I swiped to the FBI report. Name change filed in Nevada, March 2018. Before that, you operated in San Francisco under your birth name. Sarah Morrison, 26 years old, lost $3.1 million to your scheme. Her father, James, died of a heart attack 6 months later. You can't prove. I just did. FBI report case number right there. Victim statements. Financial records. I swiped again. And it wasn't just Sarah Morrison. The victim list scrolled across the screen. 12 names, 12 daughters, 12 fathers, 8 years of destruction. Jennifer Torres Austin, Amanda Richardson Denver, Lisa Martinez Phoenix, 8 years, 12 families, $22 million stolen. Nicole Brennan backed into the corner, hand over her mouth. Oh my God. And Tuesday night, I said, pulling up the toxicology report, your wife attempted to murder me. The lab analysis filled the screen. Flunitrazepam, 2.5 milligrams. Melissa Whitmore's fingerprints circled in red on the evidence photo, her prints on the wine glass stem. She drugged my drink with Rohypnol at dinner. My daughter caught her and switched our glasses. The FBI has the evidence. That's attempted murder, Mrs. Whitmore. Melissa lunged for the door. Ethan grabbed for his desk drawer, whether for evidence to destroy or an escape route I'd never know. And the FBI, I said calmly, has been listening to every word for the past 47 minutes via my daughter's wire. The glass doors exploded inward. FBI hands where we can see them. Laura Bennett led 4 SWAT agents through the entrance, body armor and weapons, overwhelming force designed to end resistance before it started. Melissa made it 3 steps before an agent tackled her to the floor. Hands yanked behind her back, handcuffs clicking closed. Ethan froze at his desk, hands raised, face drained of color. 2 agents secured him, cuffing his wrists while reading Miranda rights in flat professional voices. Nicole Brennan sobbed in the corner. I didn't know, I swear to God, I didn't know, I just started here 3 weeks ago. Laura's voice was gentle. Ms. Brennan, you're not under arrest. We know you're not involved. An agent will take your statement. Rachel collapsed into her chair, adrenaline finally catching up. I moved to her side, hand on her shoulder. You did it, I said quietly. You saved us. Laura approached, removing her tactical vest. Clean arrests. Wire captured everything, confession to the pattern, acknowledgement of the victims, his reaction to the evidence. Melissa's attempted escape adds consciousness of guilt, and we've got them both on the poisoning. Ethan and Melissa were led past us toward the elevator, hands cuffed behind their backs, heads down. The confident venture capitalist and warm mentor had vanished. What remained were two criminals caught in an 8-year lie, finally facing the truth they'd tried to bury beneath false identities and stolen money. As the elevator doors closed on them, I thought about the 12 families they'd destroyed. Sarah Morrison's father dead from a broken heart. Amanda Richardson, who hadn't spoken to her father in 3 years. Jennifer Torres, whose father had lost everything. Justice served. Predators caught. My daughter safe. But standing in that glass office watching the elevator numbers descend, one question remained. How many others like them are still out there? Andrew Bradford's story broke 48 hours after the arrests. I was opening Sullivan's Corner when my phone lit up with texts, Rachel, Laura, Richard, all sending the same CBS News link. Portland Vive C couple arrested in $22 million investment scam. Andrew stood outside the courthouse news crews behind him. Ethan and Melissa Whitmore appeared to be successful venture capitalists, but federal investigators say the couple spent 8 years targeting tech entrepreneurs and their families. 12 victims, $22 million stolen. Victim interviews followed faces, blurred voices disguised. I trusted her. She was my mentor, my friend. The whole time she was setting me up. Andrew's voice again. The case was cracked by Edward Sullivan, a 69-year-old cafe owner and retired federal prosecutor who spent 27 years putting white-collar criminals behind bars. Rachel called. They're calling you a hero. I looked at my empty cafe, Catherine's handwriting still on the chalkboard. I'm just a father who protected his daughter. By Wednesday afternoon, the FBI hotline was flooded. Laura called, exhausted. Ed, 6 more victims came forward. Seattle, San Diego, Chicago, Boston, Dallas, Miami. Another $6 million. We're up to 18 victims, total $28 million. 18 families. $28 million. 3 victims mentioned a name, Victor Castellano. Laura continued. We think there's a bigger network. 15 states, maybe 50 million or more. Ethan and Melissa might be middle management in something larger. The cafe felt too small. This could be the biggest RICO case in a decade. Exactly. Over the next 2 weeks, Laura interviewed the new victims. She asked me to sit in my prosecutor's experience reading people-building narrative. Robert and Helen Martinez, both 70s, sat across from us. Helen's hands trembled. Our daughter had a Seattle startup, Robert said. We put up our retirement $2.4 million, 40 years of saving. Now Helen works part-time at a grocery store, at 73. Patricia Johnson came alone. 45, single mother, 2 decades of working 2 jobs. $1.8 million, my granddaughter's college fund, gone. She stared at the table. I survived poverty to give my family a chance. These people weaponized that love. David Brown, 62, cancer survivor. I beat death, put my settlement $2.1 million into my daughter's startup. They didn't just take money, they broke my family. My daughter won't speak to me now. 18 stories, 18 families destroyed. In April, the grand jury convened. Michelle Warren, my former trainee, now senior AUSA, led the prosecution. She called me twice during evidence presentation, asking about RICO frameworks I'd used decades ago. The indictment came down Thursday, 47 counts. 18 wire fraud, 12 conspiracy, 8 identity theft, 5 money laundering, 2 attempted murder, the poisoning attempt on me. 2 RICO counts, the federal hammer that meant decades behind bars. The bail hearing lasted 30 minutes. Michelle stood before Judge Thomas Chambers. Your Honor, the defendants have sophisticated identity fraud capabilities. Melissa Whitmore operated under at least 4 aliases. They have offshore accounts in 3 countries. They attempted to murder a witness. Defense argued weak community ties, no prior convictions. Judge Chambers wasn't impressed. Bail denied, significant flight risk and danger to witnesses. Ethan and Melissa were let out in orange jumpsuits, shackled. The confident VC and warm mentor were gone. Only 2 criminals facing life in federal prison remained. That evening, Rachel came to my house. We sat at the kitchen table, Catherine's photo watching from the wall. Rachel stared at untouched coffee. "Dad, I brought them into our lives." Rachel. Those 6 new families. Emily's grandmother at 73. Patricia's granddaughters. If I'd seen the signs earlier. Stop. I took her hand. You did see them. That's why you passed me the note. Why you recorded Ethan. Why you swapped glasses when Melissa drugged me. But if I'd acted sooner, 18 families could have been 50. You drew the line, sweetheart. I squeezed her hand. Survivor's guilt is natural. But guilt belongs to them, not to the person who stopped them. Rachel's eyes filled. I keep thinking about Patricia's granddaughters. Helen working at a grocery store. I know. I looked at Catherine's photo. Your mother said bearing witness to suffering is part of justice. We don't look away. We remember. And we make sure those who caused it face consequences. 47 counts. They'll spend their lives in prison because you were brave enough to ask for help. Late April, Laura called as I closed the cafe. Ed, this is bigger than we thought. Michelle Warren wants you to consult on trial prep. I locked the door. Consult how? Expert witness on RICO, case strategy, jury selection. Michelle said, I'm quoting, I want Ed Sullivan's brain in the war room. Through the window, rain fell on Bybee Boulevard. 5 years ago, I'd opened this place to escape my career's weight, to find something gentle after Catherine. Now, 18 families needed justice. The skills I'd spent 27 years honing were being called back. When does trial prep start? Monday, U.S. Attorney's Office, downtown. I thought about Ethan and Melissa in detention. Victor Castellano still running his network. Families shattered by predators who weaponized love and ambition. Tell Michelle I'll be there. I arrived at the Marco Hatfield United States Courthouse at 8:15 on Monday morning, April the 22nd, 2024. The building rose 15 stories above Southwest 3rd Avenue, all granite and glass, a monument to federal authority in the heart of Portland. Spring had arrived. The city was in full bloom, and so was justice. Michelle Warren met me in the lobby. At 39, she carried herself with the quiet confidence I remembered from her first year as an assistant U.S. attorney a decade ago. She had been sharp then. Now she was formidable. Ready, Ed? She asked. Always, I said. We took the elevator to the 15th floor. Courtroom 15. A was everything a federal courtroom should be. Oak paneling, high ceilings, the seal of the United States mounted behind the bench. 60 seats in the gallery, all occupied. Rachel sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. Laura Bennett sat 2 rows back, her FBI credentials clipped to her belt. Andrew Bradford occupied the press box, notepad open. At the defense table, Ethan Whitmore sat in a charcoal suit, his face pale and thin. Beside him, Melissa wore a gray dress, her expression carefully blank. Their attorneys, Mark Holloway, for Ethan, Jennifer Reyes, for Melissa, shuffled papers and whispered. At 9:02, the door behind the bench opened. All rise, the clerk called. The Honorable Thomas Chambers presiding. Judge Chambers was 62, a Reagan appointee with silver hair and a reputation for efficiency. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked out over the courtroom. Be seated, he said. We are here in the matter of United States versus Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore. Criminal case number CR 24378. Counsel, are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Michelle said. Yes, Your Honor, Holloway echoed. The clerk swore in the jury, 12 citizens, 4 women and 8 men, ages ranging from 28 to 67. An engineer, a teacher, 2 nurses, an accountant, a retired postal worker. Ordinary people asked to weigh extraordinary crimes. Michelle rose for her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began. Over the next 4 weeks, you will hear evidence of a crime that spans 8 years, 8 states, and 18 families. You will hear how the defendants Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore weaponized hope. They targeted young women who dared to dream, who built companies and sought investment. They posed as venture capitalists. They demanded collateral not just from the founders, but from their fathers. And when those fathers signed, the defendants stole everything. She walked to the evidence table and lifted a poster board. 18 faces stared out, founders and fathers, mothers and daughters. $28 million, Michelle continued. Stolen through wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and money laundering. And when one victim's family came close to discovering the truth, the defendants attempted murder. She let that sink in. You will hear from FBI agents who traced the money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and Delaware. You will hear from toxicology experts who analyzed a wine glass laced with a dangerous sedative. You will hear from victims who lost their retirement, their children's college funds, their dignity. And you will hear from the woman who stopped them, Rachel Parker, and the man who taught her how, Edward Sullivan, a former federal prosecutor who spent 27 years putting criminals exactly like these behind bars. Michelle returned to her table. At the end of this trial, she said, I will ask you to return guilty verdicts on all 47 counts. Thank you. Mark Holloway stood. He was tall, 50, expensive suit. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, the government wants you to believe my client is a criminal mastermind. The truth is simpler. Ethan Whitmore made bad business decisions. Startups fail. Investors lose money. That is not fraud, that is capitalism. Ms. Parker is a sophisticated angel investor with $800,000 deployed across 12 deals. She knew the risks. The FBI's investigation was overzealous, driven by a retired prosecutor with an axe to grind. Jennifer Reyes was next. She was younger, 42, and her voice carried a note of desperation. Melissa Whitmore, she said, is a victim. She was manipulated by Ethan, subjected to psychological and emotional pressure. She feared for her safety. Everything she did under duress. The evidence will show she tried to cooperate, tried to stop him. She deserves your compassion, not your condemnation. I watched the jury. A few faces were skeptical, most were stone. The first 2 weeks brought a parade of witnesses. The FBI forensic accountant traced the money, $28 million, routed through 15 shell companies, ending in accounts in Georgetown and Roadtown. The toxicology expert explained flunitrazepam, 2.5 milligrams, enough to incapacitate, potentially lethal with alcohol, and identified Melissa's fingerprints on the wine glass. Then came the victims. Robert Martinez, 74, his voice breaking. We lost $2.4 million. My wife Helen is 73. She works at a grocery store now. Patricia Johnson, 45. A single mother. I lost $1.8 million, my grandchildren's college fund. Gone. David Brown, 62, a cancer survivor. $2.1 million. My settlement. My family doesn't speak to me anymore. By the 3rd week, Rachel took the stand. She explained her background: 5 years as an angel investor, 12 deals, a 40% internal rate of return, and how she had spotted the red flags in Ethan's term sheet. She described the business card, the SOS note, the recorded date, the poisoned wine glass. On cross-examination, Holloway attacked. "Ms. Parker, why didn't you report Mr. Whitmore to the authorities immediately?" Rachel met his eyes. "I wanted to protect other families," she said, "and gather complete evidence." The fourth week was mine. Michelle called me to the stand. I took the oath, sat, and looked out at the courtroom. Rachel in the front row, Laura beside her, Ethan staring at the table. "Mr. Sullivan." Michelle said, "Please state your background for the jury." "I served as an assistant United States attorney for 27 years, I said. "I prosecuted 289 cases, most involving financial fraud. My conviction rate was 87%. Judge Chambers leaned forward. "Mr. Sullivan Oxins," he said, "your reputation precedes you. This court is honored." "Thank you, Your Honor." Michelle walked me through RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. I explained the elements and enterprise, a pattern of racketeering activity, predicate acts. I compared this case to 3 others I had prosecuted in the 1990s. Then I turned to Ethan. "I've seen people like you for 27 years, I said. "You all think you're smarter than the system. You're not." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. When I stepped down, I walked past the defense table. Ethan wouldn't look at me. Melissa's hands were shaking. Justice, I thought, is a marathon. But we were nearing the finish line. The 5th week began on Monday, May 20th, 2024. The defense rested without calling Ethan Whitmore to the stand. Mark Holloway cited the 5th Amendment, the right against self-incrimination, and the jury took note. In 27 years as a prosecutor, I had learned that silence often spoke louder than testimony. Melissa, however, chose to testify. She took the stand in a navy dress. Her hands folded, her voice trembling. Jennifer Reyes led her through a narrative of abuse. Ethan had manipulated her, isolated her from friends, controlled their finances. She claimed she had not known about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the poisoning attempt. She wept as she described feeling trapped, terrified, powerless. "I wanted to leave," she said, her voice breaking, "but I was afraid. He told me if I ever tried, he would destroy me." Reyes called a defense expert, Dr. Patricia Owens, a forensic psychologist, who testified about coercive control, the patterns abusers use to dominate their partners. It was a credible theory. I had seen it before in domestic violence cases. But Michelle was ready. On cross-examination, she walked Melissa through the timeline. The marriage license from June 2021, 3 years before the first known victim. The joint bank accounts opened in the Cayman Islands in Melissa's name. The legal name changed to Diana Foster in March 2023. The social media profiles Melissa had created herself. "Ms. Whitmore," Michelle said, "you told this jury you were afraid of your husband, yet you infiltrated Rachel Parker's life for 6 months. You introduced her to Ethan. You endorsed his investment pitch. And when that failed, you put a sedative in her father's wine glass. Your fingerprints are on that glass, Ms. Whitmore. Not Ethan's. Yours." Melissa's face went pale. She had no answer. I glanced at the jury. Juror number 7. A 52-year-old high school teacher crossed her arms. Juror number 3, a 41-year-old civil engineer, shook his head slightly. They did not believe her. By the 6th week, we reached closing arguments. Holloway went first. He was smooth, practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the government wants you to believe my client masterminded an 8-year criminal conspiracy. But where is the evidence of intent? Business ventures fail. Investors lose money. That is the nature of risk. Ms. Parker is a sophisticated angel investor who deployed $800,000 across 12 deals. She understood the stakes. The FBI's investigation, driven by a retired prosecutor with a vendetta, turned a business dispute into a federal case. You must find reasonable doubt. You must acquit. Reyes followed with an appeal to mercy. Melissa Whitmore, she said, is a victim. She lived under the shadow of a man who controlled every aspect of her life. Yes, she made mistakes. Yes, she participated. But she did so out of fear, not greed. She deserves compassion, not a life sentence. Please give her a chance at redemption. Then Michelle stood. She walked to the center of the courtroom and looked each juror in the eye. 8 years, she said. 18 families, $28 million. This was not a business dispute. This was a criminal enterprise. The defendants, Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore, targeted young women who dreamed of building companies. They posed as mentors and investors. They demanded collateral not just from the founders, but from their fathers. And when one family got too close to the truth, they attempted murder. She held up the toxicology report. Flunitrazepam, 2.5 milligrams, enough to incapacitate Edward Sullivan, potentially enough to end his life. Melissa Whitmore's fingerprints are on that wine glass. Not circumstantial, not ambiguous. Her prints. Michelle turned to the defense table. Mr. Holloway asks you to find reasonable doubt, but doubt is not reasonable when it ignores evidence. Mrs. Reyes asks you to show mercy. But mercy without justice is not mercy, it is complicity. She returned to the jury. The defendants weaponized hope, Michelle said. You must weaponize justice. 47 counts. 47 guilty verdicts. Thank you. The jury began deliberations on Monday, May 20th. 4 days passed. Rachel and I waited in the courthouse cafe drinking bad coffee. Laura checked in twice a day. Andrew Bradford hovered in the press gallery. Outside, television trucks lined 3rd Avenue. On Thursday afternoon, May 23rd, a rumor circulated. The jury was close to a verdict. On Friday morning, May 24th, at 2:45, the clerk's phone rang. The jury had reached a decision. At 3:15, we assembled in courtroom 15A. The gallery was packed, 18 victims and their families, reporters, law students, curious citizens. Rachel sat beside me, her hand in mine. Across the aisle, Ethan and Melissa sat rigid, flanked by their attorneys. Judge Chambers entered. We rose. "Be seated," he said. "I understand the jury has reached a verdict. Please bring them in." The door opened. 12 jurors filed into the box, their faces unreadable. Juror number 4, Michael Blake, a 58-year-old accountant, stood. He was the foreman. In his hand, he held 47 verdict forms. "Mr. Foreman," Judge Chambers said, "has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Please hand the forms to the clerk." The clerk took the stack and began to read. In the matter of United States versus Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore, count 1, wire fraud. How do you find guilty? Count 2, wire fraud. How do you find guilty? 18 times the clerk read the charge. 18 times Blake answered guilty. 12 conspiracy counts. Guilty. 8 identity theft counts. Guilty. 5 money laundering counts. Guilty. 2 attempted murder counts. Guilty. 2 RICO counts. Guilty. 47 charges. 47 convictions. Ethan dropped his head to the table, his shoulders shaking. Melissa sobbed, her face buried in her hands. Jennifer Reyes put an arm around her, but Melissa did not seem to notice. In the gallery, Robert Martinez, 74 years old, the man whose retirement had been stolen, wept openly. His wife Helen, 73, nodded slowly, her jaw set. Patricia Johnson, the single mother, hugged her daughter. David Brown, the cancer survivor, closed his eyes and exhaled. Rachel squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. I looked at the 18 families scattered through the courtroom, some crying, some nodding with grim satisfaction, some still too wounded to feel relief. Judge Chambers thanked the jury and dismissed them. He set sentencing for Friday, June 7th at 10 in the morning. U.S. Marshals moved to the defense table, placed handcuffs on Ethan and Melissa, and led them toward the side door. As they passed, Melissa turned and looked back, not at her attorney, not at the judge, but at Rachel. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. It was not hatred I saw in her face. It was something else. Regret, envy. A longing for the kind of courage Rachel had shown I did not know. The courtroom emptied. Rachel and I stood in the aisle as victims filed past, some pausing to shake my hand, others too overwhelmed to speak. Laura caught my eye from across the room and nodded once. Outside, the late May sky was clear and cool. Rachel pulled her cardigan close. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think people like them can ever be redeemed?" I thought of Catherine, who had believed in second chances. I thought of the 12 victims who would never get theirs. I thought of Melissa's face as she looked back at Rachel, something human, something broken. "I don't know," I said, but justice had been done. And for today, that was enough. 2 weeks after the verdict on Friday, June 7th, 2024, we returned to courtroom 15A for sentencing. The gallery was full again, 18 victims and their families, reporters, law students. Rachel sat beside me in the front row, her hands folded. Laura Bennett and Andrew Bradford occupied their usual seats. At the defense table, Ethan and Melissa sat in orange jumpsuits, hands cuffed thinner than they had been at trial. Their faces were pale, hollow. At 10 o'clock, Judge Chambers entered. We rose. "Be seated," he said. "We are here for sentencing in United States versus Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore. Before I impose sentence, I will hear from the victims. Counsel, is the government ready to proceed?" Michelle Warren stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have 5 victim impact statements." "Very well. Please proceed." Patricia Johnson was the first to approach the podium. She was 45, a single mother from Dallas. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Your Honor," she said, "I lost $1,800,000, my grandchildren's college fund. My daughter trusted Ethan Whitmore. She believed in her company. Now my granddaughters work 2 jobs each just to pay for community college. I can't look my daughter in the eye. These people didn't just steal money. They stole our future." She sat down. David Brown was next. 62, a cancer survivor from Boston. His voice was quiet, resigned. "I lost $2,100,000, he said. "That was my settlement, my chance to leave something for my children, after everything the disease took from me. My family doesn't speak to me anymore. I live alone. I wake up every day knowing I failed them." He returned to his seat without looking at the defendants. Helen Martinez stepped forward. She was 73. Her gray hair pulled back, her hands gripping the podium. "Your Honor, my husband Robert and I lost $2,400,000, our retirement savings. Robert is 74. He had a heart attack last year. The doctor said it was stress. I work at a grocery store now bagging groceries because we have nothing left. These people..." Her voice broke. She took a breath. "These people destroyed us." Margaret Morrison was 4th. She was in her early 70s, the mother of Sarah Morrison, The first victim, the woman whose father had died of a heart attack, 6 months after losing $3,100,000. Margaret's voice was strong, but her eyes were red. "My daughter Sarah lost $3 million, she said. "My husband James, Sarah's father, died 6 months later. The doctors said it was a heart attack. I say these defendants caused it. Sarah has never forgiven herself. She will carry that guilt for the rest of her life. Mr. Whitmore and Mrs. Whitmore didn't just steal money. They ended my husband's life." She walked back to her seat and the courtroom was silent. Finally, Michelle called my name. I stood and walked to the podium. I had spent 27 years in federal courtrooms, but standing here on this side as a victim felt different. I looked at Rachel, then at Judge Chambers, then at the defendants. "Your Honor." I began, "I speak today on behalf of my daughter Rachel and myself. Ethan Whitmore and Melissa Whitmore didn't just steal money. They stole trust dreams and futures. My daughter built her company with her own hands. She invested her own capital. She worked 18-hour days. The defendants tried to take everything she had built, and when we resisted, they tried to take my life." I paused. "Rachel will carry this scar forever. She will question every new investor, every business relationship, every friendship. That is the legacy these defendants leave. Justice today cannot undo the harm, but it can prevent the next victim. Thank you." I returned to my seat. Rachel squeezed my hand. Jennifer Reyes stood for Melissa's mitigation plea. "Your Honor," she said, "my client is 30 years old. She has no prior criminal record. The evidence shows she was subjected to psychological coercion by Ethan Whitmore. She lived in fear. She made terrible choices, yes, but she made them under duress. I asked the court to consider a sentence of 5 years with credit for time served and an opportunity for rehabilitation." Judge Chambers listened without expression. Mark Holloway rose for Ethan. "Your Honor, my client has no history of violence. He has contributed to charitable causes." Judge Chambers interrupted. "With stolen money, Mr. Holloway." Holloway hesitated. "Your Honor, I ask the court to consider that Mr. Whitmore is 32 years old with his entire life ahead of him." A lengthy sentence. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said, "your client orchestrated an 8-year criminal conspiracy that destroyed 18 families. Sit down." Holloway sat. Judge Chambers leaned forward and looked at the defendants. "I have presided over many fraud cases in my 20 years on the bench," he said. "This case is among the most serious I have encountered. You, Mr. Whitmore and Mrs. Whitmore, did not simply steal money. You weaponized the most sacred bond, the bond between parent and child. You targeted the dreams of young women and the sacrifices of their fathers. You turned trust into a tool of exploitation. And when you were discovered, you attempted to end the life of an innocent man." He turned to Melissa. "Ms. Whitmore, your attorney argues you were a victim of coercion, but your fingerprints are on that wine glass. You made a choice. You inserted a dangerous sedative into Edward Sullivan's drink, knowing it could incapacitate or end him. That was not coercion. That was attempted murder. You will be held accountable." He turned to Ethan. "Mr. Whitmore, you remained silent throughout this trial. Silence is not remorse. It is strategy. You showed no empathy for your victims, no acknowledgement of the harm you caused. The federal sentencing guidelines recommend 15 to 18 years for offenses of this magnitude. I find that range appropriate." He paused. "Ethan Whitmore, you are hereby sentenced to 12 years, 144 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will pay restitution in the amount of $22 million jointly and severally with your co-defendant. You are prohibited from managing any business entity, and from contacting any victim. You will be remanded to FCI Sheridan in Oregon." He turned to Melissa. "Well, Melissa Whitmore, you are sentenced to 10 years, 120 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will pay restitution in the amount of $22 million jointly and severally. You are prohibited from contacting any victim. You will be remanded to FCY Dublin in California." He struck his gavel once. "This court is adjourned." Ethan sat motionless. Melissa wept. U.S. Marshals moved forward, placed them in restraints, and led them through the side door. In the gallery, a few victims clapped softly until the bailiff raised a hand. Others cried. Some sat in silence, too exhausted for relief. Rachel turned and hugged me. Laura crossed the aisle and shook Michelle's hand. Andrew Bradford scribbled notes. Outside, the early June air was warm, the courthouse steps bathed in sunlight. Rachel pulled off her jacket as we descended. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you think they can change?" I thought of Melissa's face as she was led away, tears streaming, shoulders shaking. I thought of Ethan's empty stare. I thought of Margaret Morrison, who had lost her husband, and Patricia Johnson, whose grandchildren would carry student debt for decades. "I don't know," I said. "But we've secured justice for the victims. That's what matters most today." Rachel nodded. We walked toward the parking garage, the weight of 4 months lifting slightly with each step. Justice, I thought, is never perfect. But today, it was enough. 2 months after sentencing in August 2024, I stood behind the counter at Sullivan's Corner Cafe and watched the afternoon clouds gather. Portland in August is warm and bright, though rain often threatens by evening, and the cafe was busy with summer regulars. The espresso machine hissed. A customer asked for a cinnamon roll. Life slowly was returning to normal. My phone rang. Laura Bennett. "Ed." She said, "I have good news. We've recovered the assets." The FBI had spent June and July executing search warrants and freezing accounts. Agents had seized Ethan and Melissa's penthouse in Portland, a $2,100,000 property in the Pearl District, and a condo in Seattle worth $1,400,000. Forensic accountants traced offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and Delaware. By early August, the total recovered was $9,700,000. It was not the full $22 million they had stolen. Some had been spent luxury cars, jewelry, travel. Some remained hidden in accounts the FBI had not yet cracked, but $9.7 million was a start. Laura walked me through the breakdown. $3.5 million came from real estate and vehicles. $4.8 million had been frozen in offshore accounts, thanks to cooperation from Cayman authorities. $900,000 came from auctioned luxury goods, watches, designer handbags, a Rolex collection. $500,000 came from liquidating Apex Ventures' remaining business assets, including the fake website and office lease. "It's not everything," Laura said, "but it's a start." In August 2024, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the creation of the Whitmore Victim Restitution Fund. The initial capital was $4 million drawn from the recovered assets. The remaining $5.7 million would cover litigation costs, future claims, and administrative expenses. The fund's board had 7 members. I served as chair and victim representative. Patricia Johnson, the single mother from Dallas, represented the victims alongside me. Richard Fitzgerald brought his securities law expertise. Laura Bennett served as the FBI liaison. Michelle Warren represented the U.S. Attorney's Office. Dr. Evelyn Hart, a financial counselor, and Thomas Reed, a certified public accountant, rounded out the board. Our mission was threefold: provide direct support to victims, prevent future fraud, and educate the public. By the end of the first 6 months, August 2024 to January 2025, The fund had helped 25 families. 18 were the original victims from the Whitmore case. 7 were victims of similar scams uncovered after Andrew Bradford's CBS report went national. We provided financial counseling, legal aid, and mental health support. We funded a hotline and an online database where victims could report suspicious investors. We also prevented 8 new fraud cases. Tips to the hotline led FBI agents to shut down 2 Ponzi schemes and 1 fake venture capital fund before they could steal $1. The fund recovered an additional $1,500,000 through related litigation, part of the larger network connected to Victor Castellano, who remained under federal investigation. In October 2024, Rachel received a $3 million Series A investment from Sequoia Capital, one of Silicon Valley's most respected venture firms. Sequoia had conducted a thorough due diligence process, background checks, reference calls, audits before committing a cent. Rachel's startup CyberShield now employed 15 people, 8 engineers, 3 salespeople, 2 operations staff. Rachel as CEO and Nathan Foster as COO. Nathan was an architect Rachel had met at a nonprofit event in February. He was 36, thoughtful, steady, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I liked him immediately. CyberShield's product was an AI-powered cybersecurity platform designed to detect phishing ransomware and social engineering attacks, targeting small and mid-sized businesses. The beta launch was planned for Q1 2025. I almost lost everything, Rachel told a reporter. Now I'm building something that protects others. In November 2024, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2847, the Investment Transparency and Victim Protection Act. The media called it Rachel's Law. The bill required venture capital firms managing more than $5 million to register with the Oregon Department of Financial Regulation. It mandated criminal and civil background checks for all principals. It required disclosure of prior fraud allegations. It established a victim resource fund, $500,000 per year, funded by registration fees, and created a whistleblower hotline. Rachel testified before the Senate Committee on Commerce and Workforce Development. My father and I were lucky, she said. We had resources, knowledge, and courage. Most victims don't. This law ensures they won't face predators alone. Governor Tina Kotek signed the bill into law on December 15, 2024. It took effect on January 1, 2025. Rachel became an advocate. She spoke at TechCrunch Disrupt, the Female Founder Summit, and Stanford Graduate School of Business. She mentored more than 20 female founders through a nonprofit called Founders Shield. She launched an online database, vccheck.org, in partnership with the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Investors could search backgrounds. Victims could report red flags. In the first 5 months, August to December 2024, the site processed 3,000 searches and issued 10 fraud alerts. I found my own way to contribute. I began teaching workshops, 10 red flags of investment fraud, at community colleges and senior centers. I partnered with the FBI's Portland field office to consult on elder fraud cases, romance scams, IRS impersonation schemes, fake charity appeals. In the first 5 months, my workshops reached 100 people. Catherine had always said, "Use your gifts to lift others." This was how I honored her. One evening in late December 2024, I was closing the cafe, wiping down tables, stacking chairs, when my phone rang. Rachel. "Dad." She said, her voice soft and warm. "I think I'm ready." Ready for what? Ready to trust someone again. I smiled, my throat tightening. "That's the bravest thing you've said all year," I told her. Outside, the winter rain had softened to a drizzle. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, and for the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten: hope. Justice, I thought, is not just about punishment. It is about restoration. It is about building something better from the ruins. And we were building. In January 2025, Rachel attended a networking event at Powell's City of Books, the massive independent bookstore that occupies an entire city block in downtown Portland. The event Portland Tech Founders Mixer drew about 50 people, startup founders, investors, lawyers, and curious students. Rachel stood near the architecture section, half listening to a conversation about venture capital trends, when she noticed a man nearby. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a navy sweater over jeans. He wasn't networking aggressively. He was reading the back cover of a book on sustainable architecture. She walked over. "Good book?" she asked. He looked up, smiled. "I think so. I'm an architect, so I'm biased." They talked for 20 minutes. His name was Nathan Foster. He was 36, ran a small architecture firm with 8 employees, and specialized in residential and community projects, affordable housing community centers, green building. He didn't ask what Rachel did until she mentioned CyberShield in passing. Then he asked thoughtful questions about cybersecurity for small businesses, not revenue or valuation. At the end of the evening, he handed her a business card. "If you'd like to talk more about architecture or anything else, I'd enjoy that," he said. 2 weeks later, they met for coffee at Stumptown on 3rd Avenue. Rachel was nervous. Nathan was calm. They talked for 2 hours. Nathan's story was straightforward. He had grown up in Beaverton, a Portland suburb. He studied architecture at Oregon State, then earned a master's degree at UC Berkeley. He married in 2018, divorced in 2023. Amicable, no children, his ex-wife had moved to San Francisco for a job. His parents still lived in Beaverton. His sister taught middle school in Eugene. He loved hiking design and old bookstores. Rachel appreciated his transparency. Halfway through their second coffee, she took a breath. "Nathan," she said, "I need to tell you something. Last year, my ex-boyfriend tried to defraud my father and me. It was national news." Nathan nodded. "I read about it. You were incredibly brave." Rachel blinked. "You knew. I recognized your name when we met," he said. "But I wanted you to tell me if and when you were ready. If you're comfortable, I'd like to get to know you slowly at your pace." Rachel felt a wave of relief. "And if you want to run a background check," Nathan added, "I completely understand." Rachel laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "I might take you up on that." In February, Rachel did exactly that. She used the vccheck.org database she had helped build, and she hired a private investigator Laura Bennett recommended. The results came back clean. No criminal record, no civil suits, credit score of 780, divorce finalized without dispute. No outstanding debts. References from colleagues and even his ex-wife were positive. Rachel called Nathan. "You passed." "I'm glad," he said. "Now can we have dinner?" In March. Rachel introduced Nathan to her father and Laura Bennett over dinner at Higgins, the same restaurant where Ethan Whitmore had first pitched his fraudulent investment. Rachel had chosen the location deliberately. She wanted to reclaim it. Nathan asked Edward about his years as an assistant U.S. attorney. He listened carefully, didn't try to impress, didn't ask about finances or Rachel's startup funding. Edward watched him closely. He was nothing like Ethan. No charm offensive, no probing questions, no cold flicker behind the eyes. Just a man who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know his daughter. In April, Nathan attended the beta launch of CyberShield. He asked Rachel thoughtful questions about the product. How the AI detected threats, how it served small businesses, but never about revenue projections or company valuation. He met her 15 employees, remembered their names, and stayed to help clean up after the event. In May, Rachel visited Nathan's architecture office in the Alberta Arts District. It was a modest studio with 8 employees drafting tables and scale models of affordable housing projects. Nathan showed her a design for a low-income housing complex with solar panels and rain gardens. "I want to build things that help people," he said, "not just make money." Rachel saw then that his values aligned with her service sustainability community. In June, Nathan came to a CyberShield company picnic at Laurelhurst Park. He played frisbee with the engineers, chatted with the sales team, and didn't dominate the conversation. Afterward, 2 of Rachel's employees told her, "He's genuine." In July, Rachel and Nathan hiked Eagle Creek Trail in the Columbia River Gorge. It was a warm summer morning, mist rising from the waterfall. As they walked beside the cascade, Rachel told him the full story: Ethan's manipulation, Melissa's infiltration, the poisoning attempt, the trial, the sentencing. Nathan held her hand. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty platitudes. When she finished, he said simply, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Rachel realized then that trust was not something you lost and never found again. It was something you could rebuild slowly with the right person. In late July, Nathan called and asked if he could meet Edward for coffee at Sullivan's Corner. He was nervous when he sat down. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, "I know trust has to be earned. I've spent 7 months trying to show Rachel and you who I am. I love your daughter. I want to spend my life proving she made the right choice. I'd like your blessing to propose." Edward studied him. He saw no Ethan Whitmore charm, no rehearsed pitch, no hidden agenda. Just a good man who loved his daughter. "Nathan," Edward said, "you've shown respect, patience, and integrity. You have my blessing. But more importantly, you have Rachel's trust. Don't betray it." "I won't, sir," he said. "I promise." The following weekend, Nathan drove Rachel to the Columbia River Gorge. They hiked to Multnomah Falls, where summer greenery framed the gray cliffs and mist rose from the water. At a quiet overlook, Nathan knelt and pulled a small velvet box from his jacket. "Rachel," he said, "you are the strongest, bravest person I know. I want to build a life with you, slowly, honestly, together. Will you marry me?" Rachel, tears streaming down her face, said yes. A week later, Nathan came to the cafe. Edward reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a velvet box he had been keeping for months. Inside was Catherine's sapphire ring, a blue sapphire in a vintage platinum setting. She had worn it for more than 30 years. "Catherine would want Rachel to have this," Edward said, "and she would approve of you." Nathan took the box, his hands trembling. "I'll honor this," he said. "I'll honor her." Edward nodded, his eyes wet. Outside, the August evening was warm and still, the air carrying the scent of roses from the cafe's patio garden. Love, Edward thought, is not about perfection. It is about patience, honesty, and the courage to trust again. And Rachel had found it. I woke at 5 o'clock on Saturday morning, October 17th, 2025. The October morning was crisp and cool, leaves turning gold and red outside the cafe windows. I had closed Sullivan's Corner the day before to prepare. White linen tablecloths covered the tables. Mason jars filled with wildflowers, Oregon iris, lupine, Indian paintbrush sat on every surface. String lights hung across the patio. 40 white folding chairs faced a simple wooden arch draped in climbing roses. Sullivan's Corner Cafe. The place I had opened after Catherine died. The place where Rachel had slipped me that desperate note nearly 2 years ago would host my daughter's wedding. I walked into the kitchen and pulled out Catherine's handwritten recipe card for cinnamon rolls. The ink had faded, the edges were worn, but I knew every word by heart. I had watched her make them 1,000 times. Now I made them for Rachel. As the dough rose and the smell of cinnamon and butter filled the cafe, I touched the recipe card and whispered, "Wish you were here." At 9 o'clock, Rachel arrived with Hannah Turner, her former employee and bridesmaid. Rachel wore a simple ivory dress, tea-length lace sleeves vintage style. Her hair was pinned up. She wore minimal makeup. When I saw her, my throat tightened. She looked like Catherine at 34. "Dad!" she said, her hands shaking. "I'm nervous." I led her to the small office behind the counter and pulled a velvet box from my desk drawer. Inside was Catherine's sapphire ring, the one Nathan had returned to me so I could give it to Rachel this morning. "Your mother wore this for 30 years, I said, sliding it onto Rachel's right hand. "She would be so proud of you." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I wish she could be here." "She is," I said. "Every day. In you." At 11 o'clock, the ceremony began. 40 guests filled the patio. Laura Bennett sat in the front row wearing a navy dress and a rare smile. Richard Fitzgerald sat beside her. Andrew Bradford occupied the second row notepad, conspicuously absent. Patricia Johnson and Helen Martinez, two of the victims who had testified at trial, sat near the back, their faces soft with pride. Nathan's parents, David and Susan Foster, sat across the aisle with Nathan's sister, Emma. The rest of the guests were a mix of Cyber Shield employees, Nathan's architecture team, and a handful of college friends. The officiant was retired Judge Thomas Chambers, the man who had presided over the Whitmore trial and sentencing. He had agreed to officiate as a symbol. The same voice that had delivered justice would now bless a new beginning. An acoustic guitar began to play "Here Comes the Sun." I offered Rachel my arm, and we walked down the short aisle. Nathan stood beneath the arch in a charcoal suit, his eyes glistening. I placed Rachel's hand in his and whispered, "Take care of her." "I will, sir," Nathan said. Judge Chambers smiled. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The ceremony was simple. Nathan spoke his vows first. "Dear Rachel," he said, "I promise you transparency, patience, and respect. I will never ask you to trust blindly. I will earn it every day." Rachel's voice was steady. "Nathan, you taught me that trust isn't foolish, it's selective. Thank you for being worthy of it. I choose you today and always." They exchanged rings. Nathan slipped Catherine's sapphire onto Rachel's left hand, then his own wedding band. Rachel slid a platinum band onto Nathan's finger. Judge Chambers raised his hands. "By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss." They kissed. 40 people cheered. The reception began at noon. Tables filled the cafe and patio. We served Edward's cinnamon rolls food from Portland's best carts, Nong's cow man, Gai Bing Mi dumplings, salt and straw ice cream, and local Pinot Noir and craft beer. Laura stood to give the first toast. "Rachel," she said, "I watched you face down predators with courage most FBI agents never find. Edward, you raised a warrior. Nathan, you're a lucky man, and you know it." Laughter and applause filled the patio. Richard Fitzgerald went next. 18 months ago, we sat in my office planning a legal trap. Today we celebrate a legal union. Rachel, you turned trauma into triumph. Congratulations." Andrew Bradford stood grinning. "I'm a journalist," he said. "I've covered disasters, scandals, and trials. But the best story I ever told was about a father and daughter who refused to be victims. Rachel and Nathan, may your story be long and boring in the best way." More laughter. Finally, I stood. My hands trembled as I raised my glass. 18 months ago, I said, I thought I'd lost my daughter to a predator. Today, I'm not losing a daughter, I'm gaining a son. Nathan, you showed Rachel that good men exist. Catherine would have loved you. Welcome to the family. I sat down, wiping my eyes. The first dance was At Last by Etta James. Rachel and Nathan swayed together, smiling, whispering. Then the DJ called for the father-daughter dance. Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World began to play Catherine's favorite song. Rachel took my hand, and we danced. "You did it, kiddo," I whispered. "You survived. You rebuilt. Your mom would be so proud." "We did it, Dad," Rachel said. "Together." I looked around the patio. Guests smiled. Nathan watched with gentle eyes. Laura dabbed tears. Patricia Johnson and Helen Martinez nodded with quiet pride. This, I thought, is what justice looks like after the courtroom healing love community. At 3 o'clock, Rachel and Nathan climbed into Nathan's Subaru tin cans tied to the bumper, a just married sign taped to the back window. They waved as they drove away. I stood on the cafe steps with Laura, Richard, Andrew, Patricia, and Helen, my chosen family. As the car disappeared around the corner, I pulled my wallet from my pocket and opened it to a small black and white photo of Catherine from the 1990s. She was smiling, her hair dark, her eyes bright. I whispered, "She's going to be okay. We did it." Laura put a hand on my shoulder. I smiled. The October afternoon sun slanted through the maple trees, their leaves brilliant red and gold against the blue sky. Inside the cafe, the cinnamon rolls sat on the counter, still warm. The wildflowers glowed in the afternoon sun. The string lights swayed gently in the breeze. Life, I thought, is not about avoiding pain. It is about surviving it, learning from it, and building something beautiful on the other side. And we had built something beautiful. In December 2025, 2 months after Rachel's wedding, a thick envelope arrived at Sullivan's Corner Cafe. The return address read, Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin, California. Inmate number 47382-112. Melissa Whitmore. I stood behind the counter holding the envelope, my heart tightening. I hadn't thought much about Melissa since the sentencing 18 months ago. Life had moved forward. Rachel's wedding, CyberShield's growth, the victim fund's work. The Whitmores had become a story I told at workshops, a case study in fraud prevention. They were no longer people. They were lessons. But now here was Melissa's handwriting. I opened the envelope. 4 pages, blue ink, neat cursive. Mr. Sullivan, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I am deeply, profoundly sorry. What I did, what Ethan and I did, destroyed lives. I stole your peace, Rachel's trust, and the futures of 18 families. There is no excuse. I sat down and kept reading. Melissa wrote about her childhood. Her father had been an alcoholic. Her mother had left when Melissa was 12. She had been raised by her grandparents in rural Nevada, poor and isolated. She met Ethan in Las Vegas in 2020 when she was 26. He was charismatic, confident, and he promised her an escape from poverty. The first scam, Sarah Morrison in San Francisco, happened in 2021. Melissa had been scared, but Ethan convinced her that these people have too much money and we deserve a chance. She rationalized each crime after that, telling herself they were Robin Hood taking from the rich. But they weren't. They were just thieves. I saw Rachel's wedding photo in a newspaper someone left in the common room, she wrote. She looked radiant. I will never have that. I will never marry, never have children, never build a life outside these walls. I earned this. But it hurts to see what I could have been if I'd made different choices. Over the past 18 months, Melissa had participated in therapy, trauma counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy. She had joined a GED tutoring program teaching literacy to other female inmates. She had researched Catherine's obituary in the prison library and learned that I had lost my wife shortly before Rachel and I faced her and Ethan. Your wife must have been an extraordinary woman, she wrote. I wish I'd had a mother like her. Maybe I would have turned out differently. She did not ask for early release. She did not beg for forgiveness. I have 8.5 years left, she wrote. I will serve them. I just wanted you and Rachel to know the blame is mine. Ethan manipulated me, yes, but I made my own choices. I chose greed over integrity. I chose to poison your wine glass. I am the one responsible. She closed with this, thank you for stopping us. If you hadn't, we would have destroyed more families. You saved people I will never meet. I hope that gives you some peace. Melissa Whitmore, number 47382-112. I folded the letter and walked to the window. Winter rain streaked the glass. The cafe was quiet. I didn't know what I felt. Anger, pity, confusion. All three. For 27 years, I had been trained to see defendants in black and white, guilty or innocent, criminal or victim. Melissa was guilty. She had done terrible things, but she was also human, broken, and maybe capable of growth. That evening, I drove to Rachel and Nathan's house, a small craftsman, in the Selwood neighborhood. I handed Rachel the letter without a word. She read it silently, her face unreadable. When she finished, she set it down on the kitchen table. Dad, she said, I don't forgive her. I can't. She tried to hurt you. She targeted me for months, pretended to be my friend, my mentor. That betrayal, it still stings. She paused. But I don't hate her anymore. I used to lie awake imagining her suffering in prison. Now I just feel sad. She wasted her life. She'll be 40 when she gets out. No career, no family, no trust from anyone. That's punishment enough. Nathan, sitting beside her, nodded quietly. She's pathetic, Dad, Rachel said. Not evil, just pathetic. I drove home in the December rain, thinking about Rachel's words. At home, I sat at the kitchen table with Catherine's photo, the black and white one from the 1990s, the one where she's smiling young alive. I thought about the 289 cases I had prosecuted. How many defendants had written letters? A few. How many had been sincere? Hard to say. Does sincerity erase harm? Does it matter maybe? Justice punishes. That is its job. Redemption is something else, something messier, harder to measure. Melissa would serve 8.5 more years. She would carry the weight of what she did for the rest of her life. The letter didn't change that. It didn't erase the poison in my wine glass, the fear in Rachel's eyes, the 18 families whose lives she helped destroy. But it showed she was trying. That counted for something. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer next to Catherine's recipe card and the empty velvet box that had held her sapphire ring. I would not reply. There was nothing to say. But I kept the letter. Someday maybe it would remind me that justice is not simple, that people are not puzzles with one right answer, that some are beyond saving and some are not, and some, like Melissa, live somewhere in between. I whispered to Catherine's photo, there are questions without answers, only time. Outside, the winter rain continued. Inside, the cafe was warm. And I realized that after 18 months, I had finally let go, not of the anger, not entirely, but of the need to understand why people like Melissa make the choices they do. Some questions I thought are not meant to be answered. They are just meant to be carried. 19 months after sentencing on Thursday evening, January 15, 2026, I locked Sullivan's Corner Cafe and stepped into the cold Portland night. I was 70 years old. My hair was silver, my back stiffer, but my purpose was clear. As I walked to my car, I passed a young woman on her phone. I'm meeting a venture capitalist tomorrow, she said. How do I verify his background? vccheck.org. her friend replied. Rachel Parker built it. The woman nodded, typing. I smiled and kept walking. She had the tools now. The database. The law. The workshops. The hotline. The war against predators would never end. But neither would hope. I drove home thinking about 19 months of work. The Victim Fund had helped 80 families in Oregon and Washington. We had prevented 15 fraud cases and recovered $6 million. Rachel's law took effect January 1st. Washington State was considering similar legislation. Rachel's company CyberShield employed 25 people and generated $2.5 million in its first year. The VC check database had processed 8,000 searches and issued 25 fraud alerts. And Rachel was 8 weeks pregnant. If the baby was a girl, they would name her Catherine. Ethan had served 18 months at FCY Sheridan. He would not be released until 2036. Melissa had served 18 months at FCY Dublin. With good behavior, she might be released in 2032. The FBI investigation into Victor Castellano was ongoing. Laura was now supervisory special agent. Richard was on track to make partner. Andrew led a CBS investigative team. I returned to the cafe. I had forgotten my keys. Inside, I sat alone. Catherine's photograph hung on the wall, her smile frozen in black and white from the 1990s. I thought about the journey. Prosecutor to cafe owner. Victim to protector. Protector to advocate. 3 lessons: age is strength. Experience is armor. Trust must be earned, but good people exist. Love endures. Catherine had been gone 7 years, but I heard her voice every morning. She was woven into everything I did. I opened my notebook and wrote a journal entry for the fraud prevention manual I was developing with the FBI. The Whitmore case would become required reading. My phone rang. Rachel. Dad! She said, laughing. We just got back from the doctor. The baby's healthy. My throat tightened. That's wonderful. If it's a girl, we want to name her Catherine. Is that okay? I closed my eyes. Your mother would be honored. We love you, Dad. I love you too. I locked the cafe and stepped outside. The January sky was clear. Stars were visible, rare for Portland. I looked up and whispered to Catherine, we raised her well. She's stronger than both of us. Then I spoke aloud to every predator who thought age made me weak, who thought fathers wouldn't fight. I'm still watching. I'm still here. And I have 289 reasons never to stop. I walked home through quiet streets, my breath visible in cold air. An old man with a young man's fire. The fight would never end, but neither would I. Looking back, I see how family betrayal destroys lives in silence. I prosecuted criminals for 27 years, yet nearly missed the predator targeting my daughter. Don't be like me. Don't assume experience makes you immune. Family betrayal arrives with smiles and promises. These grandpa stories aren't about heroes saving the day. Rachel saved herself by trusting her instincts. Our friends saved us with their expertise. God gave us courage when surrender seemed easier. Faith and community are shields against darkness. Predators don't target the weak, they target the hopeful. They weaponize dreams. Whether it's family betrayal or strangers exploiting ambition, the pattern is identical: isolate, pressure, steal. My advice: verify everything. Trust selectively. Teach your children that no is wisdom, not weakness. If you're reading these grandpa stories as a father or grandfather, remember your job isn't sheltering them from danger, it's teaching them to recognize it. At 70, I've convicted 289 criminals. But the case that mattered most wasn't in a courtroom. It was at a dinner table reading my daughter's desperate note. Grandpa stories aren't about perfection. They're about refusing to surrender. I'm still watching. I have 289 reasons never to stop. Thank you for journeying with me to the end. Drop a comment. What would you do facing Edward and Rachel's impossible choice? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more. Quick note. While inspired by real fraud patterns, some elements were dramatized for storytelling. If this style isn't your preference, explore other content that suits you better.